This program is designed to show the latest aircraft evacuation research work carried out by the Applied Psychology Unit of Cranfield University in the United Kingdom. The research was the first of its kind to incorporate the use of escape slides with competitive passenger behavior. The objective was to assess the impact of the role of the cabin crew during an emergency evacuation. The research was commissioned by the UK Civil Aviation Authority and the US Federal Aviation Administration. Cabin crew are legally required on board aircraft to ensure the safety of passengers, but their day-to-day activities reflect only some of the considerable safety training they undertake. Passenger care, in-flight services, and sales of duty-free goods are in stark contrast to their duties in the event of an emergency. 3 different styles of behavior were adopted to focus on how cabin crew might perform during an aircraft evacuation. These were assertive cabin crew. The cabin crew shouted concise, positive evacuation commands, used gestures to reinforce instructions, and made physical contact with volunteers. Non-assertive cabin crew. The cabin crew politely requested the volunteers to evacuate and used minimal gestures and physical contact. And no cabin crew involvement. The cabin crew left the aircraft prior to the evacuation of the volunteers. It was expected that assertive cabin crew actions would produce faster evacuation times. In an emergency, passengers may compete with each other, and this may slow down the speed of evacuation. To stimulate this competitive behavior in the trials, a system of reward payments was used to motivate the volunteers. The research was carried out at Cranfield, which has a history of research into passenger safety. Previous research has included evacuations through Type 1 floor-level exits and Type 3 over-wing exits, evacuations in smoke-filled cabins, and with water sprays operating. The Applied Psychology research team at Cranfield was headed by Professor Helen Muir, a leading specialist in aviation human factors. This latest research is a continuation of the original program, which began in 1987.
That is your cue to literally undo your seatbelts and get out as quickly as you can.
The trials, which consisted of 89 evacuations carried out over a 6-month program, were undertaken within an aircraft cabin simulator inside one of the hangars at Cranfield. The cabin was typical of a Boeing 737, which, although only half the length of the actual aircraft, had the same width and height. The unit was equipped with Type 1 exits. Slides typical of those fitted to aircraft were specially designed and manufactured in order that the potential for injury was minimized. The seating configuration was 3 seats either side of a single aisle. The total seating capacity was 60. The cabin was equipped with floor proximity lighting, 1 double cabin crew seat with full harness, and passenger address system.
If you aren't familiar with the operation of the seatbelt,
a computerized center was used to control and monitor lighting, sound, and the passenger address system. For the research trials, video cameras were installed strategically within the cabin, whilst additional cameras were used to record events outside the unit. Trial participants were volunteers, recruited from advertisements placed in local newspapers. Strict guidelines were used to select volunteers, including age, weight, and medical condition, to reduce the possible risk of injury during the trials. The volunteers were given very little information prior to the tests, in order that they would not be influenced in advance of the test scenarios. On arrival, they reported to the registration desk and were issued with an identification number and then photographed. The identification numbers were printed on bibs to ensure they were clearly visible to the cameras. Each participant was required to complete a medical questionnaire before attending a medical interview. The doctor carefully questioned each volunteer, checking their medical history and ensuring they were fully fit. As a result, a number of volunteers were unable to take part in the trials.
That's fine. Fine. Bye-bye.
Prior to boarding, the volunteers were briefed by Professor Muir, who explained the background and objectives of the trials. They were advised about procedures should a potentially dangerous situation arise during the evacuation, and were given instruction on the use of the slides.
Stand on the edge of the aircraft and jump and sit down onto the slide with your feet out in front of you, and you'll go straight down to the bottom.
Research team members acted as cabin crew. This was to maintain consistent levels of assertive and non-assertive actions. Firemen were placed at the foot of the slides to assist the volunteers if necessary. For realism, each evacuation trial commenced with a pre-departure safety briefing, which included instruction on exit location and how to fasten and unfasten seatbelts.
Are clearly marked and are being pointed out to you. These are the two.
In order that volunteers would not anticipate the command to evacuate, each test started at a different stage of a simulated flight. After each aircraft evacuation, the volunteers completed a questionnaire recording their experiences during the evacuation. Assertive crew produced the most rapid evacuations, using concise, clear, positive and loud commands. If volunteers hesitated at the top of the slides, the cabin crew physically intervened to ensure that the flow rate of the evacuation was not slowed down. The cabin crew also provided assistance to volunteers who became wedged at the bulkhead. Analysis of the questionnaires indicated that volunteers responded well to the assertive behavior of the crew. Research team members discussed the general reaction of volunteers during assertive evacuations.
Passengers seem to respond in a more organised and better sense, and we find it a lot easier. Yeah. You feel like you have command of the situation, how people are jumping onto the slides, how they're behaving in the cabin. We sort of tend to say, under your seatbelts, come this way, this door, or both doors, exit blocked, so that they can't be misunderstood, so that they always understand exactly what we're saying, and very short and to the point.
Yeah. And if people are hesitating and we've already used those commands, just simply shout, come on, at them and make them move. Get eye contact with them and start shouting at them.
When the crew adopted a non-assertive role, the rate of evacuation was much slower. Volunteers were more hesitant to jump onto the slides. Build-up occurred at the bulkhead as there was minimal crew intervention.
When it's non-assertive, I don't feel like I have control in the cabin. And I think the passengers also prefer our assertive behaviour. They feel like they can trust us and that we're going to get them out. Whereas when we're being non-assertive, I think we've even had instances when passengers are very angry because we haven't really played a sort of more positive role in their evacuation.
Yeah.
Under your seatbelt.
In the third series of tests, the cabin crew evacuated first. This was to represent the situation when cabin crew may be incapacitated. These tests produced similar evacuation times as the non-assertive cabin crew scenarios. This scenario also created the worst blockages at the bulkhead. During many of the trials, some of the volunteers demonstrated particularly highly motivated behavior. Two of these volunteers explained why they had climbed over the backs of seats.
I mean, I got out of my seat and there just seemed to be a wall of people and they weren't going anywhere. I looked to my side and there was just like empty seats. I thought it's going to be the quickest and easiest route, so I just went for the seats really, just straight over the top.
Yeah, I wanted to get out, obviously, like everybody else. We know it's a mock situation, but as soon as you get a aircraft of people just charging to get out, you want to get out as well. My aisle in front of me was just totally blocked. You can't go through them, so the only way you've got is around them. And that was it. I just went around them as quick as I could. It's self-preservation. I want to live. There's the plane's on fire, you know, you say, after you? No, you get out.
No, certainly for me, I just didn't care about the other people. You know, I just wanted to get myself off. Didn't really care about them, didn't think about them. Just wanted to get off. I got out to the seat and it was blocked, so I said, I'll go over the seats, and away I went. And I started passing a few people, thinking, great, this is going. and all of a sudden the seats collapsed. I actually caught my foot in between the seat, and like everyone was keeping going, and I was stuck. I started to panic. I was really getting concerned, and I mean, I was just going wild from then. Just got my foot out, carried on barging people out of the way, and in the end, I think I probably ended up going slower.
Come this way.
On completion of the evacuation trials in December of 1994, the results were analysed by the research team. Additionally, the Cranfield work has produced extensive data on the rates of passenger evacuation. This has assisted Professor Gallia at Greenwich University with the development of a computer model for evacuation rates known as Exodus. Currently, during the aircraft certification process, full-scale evacuation trials are carried out. It must be demonstrated that an aircraft is capable of being evacuated in 90 seconds using only 50% of the exits. The professor explained how the program would assist future research.
The use of validated computer models could reduce the total reliance we currently have on full-scale evacuation trials and experiments. We could, for example, use the evacuation model in the design and development of safer aircraft.
During the spring of 1995, a CAA and FAA paper was produced detailing the findings of the research. Some of the main conclusions were that the behavior of cabin crew significantly influenced the speed at which passengers were able to evacuate an aircraft. The number of cabin crew also significantly influenced the evacuation speed. The cabin crew must play a positive role in order to achieve a rapid evacuation. And cabin crew should be trained specifically to behave in an assertive manner during an evacuation.